Welcome.
I'm ready for an experience with
You
John
ready for
Kai
an
Herbert.
experience? So my first question is: have you ever had DMT?
Ooh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Joe Rogan. I appreciate that.
So completely original here. Completely original here. So,
Yeah,
dude, like,
yeah.
that's a joke question.
Yeah.
I guess, like, you and I have worked together, and yeah, I've loved working with you.
Mm.
Like, I see you as someone who will always look for whatever the most logical pathway is to something. So it really removes the spiritual bypassing component out of our work together, which makes life so sweet.
Mm.
Makes it very, very, very easy, very, very straightforward. And so I guess in that, like, what, and I find you one of the most ambitious person that I know in my closest circles. So, like, what has made you that way? Like, what motivates you to do the things that you do?
Oh, wow, man. Initially when that question is asked, there's a temptation to be surface layer of like, how would you say? Oh, it's a biological driver, or it's the way that we're wired to be ambitious. But it's like, well, then why isn't everyone like me, or why isn't everyone like, why am I like other people, or not like other people? So I guess the answer to that question accurately, I have to look into my experiences. Like I have to look in firstly, who I am as a person at my core. Like what's my, who am I regardless if I strip all my experiences away, and what experiences have shaped me. So I guess I'll answer it that way. So the first thing is, for me, I think I've naturally always been very curious about how things work. As a kid, I remember I used to pull things apart. I used to, yeah, pull things apart, and then also I used to get obsessed with certain things. And then I wouldn't be obsessed with certain things. Be like obsessed, then not obsessed. So there was phases I'd go through where I was obsessed with certain technologies, certain equipment, certain like batteries. I was obsessed with batteries for a short period there, which is when I was like 4 or 5. And maybe we can speak into the characterology of this, or the meaning behind this, if there is one. You go down the Jordan Peterson path of talking about the meaning of meaning for 4 hours. Um, um,
Your proclivity to.
no, no. What do you mean precisely by that? No, no, no. What do you mean? So yeah, no, like that's the first thing. I think that's a part of it. So that's my. I'm talking about my nature here. My nature is that. And my nature is, yeah, like the obsessive type as well. And experience wise, um, yeah, I grew up in an environment that wasn't physically volatile. Like it wasn't volatile in the sense of like uh like being abused or anything like that. Nothing like that. But it was very emotionally demanding, right? And the way I came into this world was whether or not you believe in it or not, like if you remember your childhood experiences, I don't think it's a belief thing, but when not you believe it affects you. Like I came into the world in a very stressful state. I was a forceps. I think it's forceps, when they pull you
Forceps.
out, they rip you out. Yeah, forceps,
Yep.
forceps. I was pulled out of my mum, and I wasn't ready to come out, obviously. And then growing up as well, yeah, the first couple of years, mum said it was really stressful for her, and like that always gets passed on to the child, I think. So, and then growing up, there was always a sensitivity to people and to environments and circumstances, and um, for me, by my nature is very defiant, very disagreeable. That's a nature thing. I've been that way since I was 3. Like, Luke, do this. No. So, but at the same time, I'm very sensitive to people's emotions. So I have that a weird combination of I feel the urge to people please, but I don't do it. If that makes sense in a
Yeah.
weird way. So I'm like very aware of people and very aware of circumstances, but also at the same time very disagreeable, and like I won't, because most people pleasers, they're aware because they are people pleasers at their core, but I'm aware by necessity and I'm disagreeable by necessity, so by default. So and I think not to sound grandiose or like brag a little bit, but like I think I was naturally born with a high IQ. And I've taken an IQ test before, and it's quite high. So I think that all those things combined kind of meshed me into who I am now. Like, You said ambitious was the word. I guess I'm just obsessed. I'm not really like, I don't see myself as ambitious as much as I am like, I'm just interested in something, then I'm obsessed with it. Like I'm just doing a business now, and like now I have to get it done. Like now I'm obsessed with it. Um, and yeah, just going through like lots of pain in my life, I guess you could say, has made me quite acute and aware of what I do and don't want. So yeah, that's kind of a summary.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I hear that summary of coming out, of you being pulled out before your mum's before you wanted to come out, so being forced into the world,
Yep.
pulled into the world, being called into the world, and
Mm.
then your family dynamic of whatever was there, it was hard on your mum, like you being there. Um, and what I also hear is that concept of what concept of like being a burden,
Hmm.
like, and in that, like the framing it as being a burden. Have you felt that before?
Well, I have, but yeah, certainly, of course. Like, there's always in all of our sessions, I'm always like, oh, I feel bad for sharing this. I feel bad for doing this. I feel bad. Like, yeah, that's okay. So there's always that burden there of like being too emotionally too much. Because I guess when I was younger, like there was, and it's not their fault. Like I want to make it clear, like if they listen to this, it's not their fault. I don't blame them, not
Yeah,
one bit at all. Actually, like it's fine. I'm cool with it. But as young when I was younger, like there wasn't much room to be emotional, so to speak.
yeah,
There really was, but the significant experience in my life where it's like I'm, sad or upset by things, it's like it'd be ignored. So, there was a lot of feelings of, yeah, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like what you said, like a burden, feeling like a burden. So
yeah, yeah. Cool, cool, cool. So in that, like that, had that sensation of feeling like a burden. Like, how has that shaped like your relationship dynamics?
Um, well, I think first and foremost, my attachment style to people in intimate relationships would be more on the anxious side. I don't know now because I haven't been in a relationship for some time. But I think that it affects my relationships in the sense that I won't emotionally burden someone. Like I'm
Mm.
very sensitive to how I'm making someone feel emotionally, and I won't dump stuff onto them, right? Like at least if I do, I feel guilty. But like for the most part, if I'm upset with someone or if I'm annoyed by someone, I might communicate it. But I see it as my duty to take that on and to be like, well, I feel this way, so do I want to share that? And like, I don't feel the need or the compulsion to share all my emotions with someone. So yeah, that's kind of a gist, I guess.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Luke. Um, I guess what keeps popping out at me is like this. Like I know you in multiple systems. Like I see you, Luke, who you are right now. I see Luke in the characterology. I see Luke in human design. I see Luke in astrology. So I see all these overlays of who you are as a person, and then whatever you express, like right now, is who you want to be in that moment. And I guess when we first started working with each other, there was this moment of who is it that you want to be, right? And journeying through owning who you are and being okay with who you are. What's that been like for you?
When I first saw you, I had some, this is one part of me right now. We're talking about, I'm in a podcast right now. We're having discussions. So there's multiple parts to a person. Some are just as they are, but I think there's people that have certain parts. And one of the parts that I was struggling to integrate was the more comedic kind of funny side, being silly, just being a goose, right?
You
That's a
wouldn't
big
get it.
part of who I. Yeah, I wouldn't get it. It's a growth mindset thing. It's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to understand with the experience. Um, yeah, so I was having a hard time integrating that because I was with someone at the time, and I thought that they weren't accepting me because I was overly joking all the time, like always joking around, always being silly, not taking things seriously, and I'd assumed at the time that was the problem that I had in the relationship, and that was me, like maybe like my, I had people tell me around me that were envious of me at the time, or still are to this day, who were saying I have dark humor, I have dark. It's like, Luke, you have your comedy, like, and what the fuck does this even mean? And we can get into it, but like, your humor comes from a dark place. I'm sitting there like as someone who's quite logical, and quite heady, so to speak. It's like, well, everything comes from a dark place to a degree. Even that comment that you said comes from a dark place. It's like, And on top of that, you can't really label something dark or not dark based on, your just subjective experience. It's like there's that factor as well, right? So in mind, I'm thinking like that doesn't even fucking make sense. What it is, it's a convenient way to label something that fits your narrative or helps you avoid an emotion that you don't want to experience. Like, hey, actually, I'm envious of this person. They were out and about and they were talking to this person that I liked, this chick that I liked, and they liked Luke more, or this happened. It's like, that's fine. Just own it, right? So in that time, I had 3 or 4 people at the same time saying, like, basically saying to me, like, your humor comes from a dark place. And then I had this person I was seeing as well who was saying to me, oh, you joke around all the time. Like, it seems like you use it as like a mask kind of thing. So, and the truth is, it's both, right? Like, there was an element of like, hey, like I feel socially uncomfortable. My emotional home that I've built a personality around is comedy, right? So on one level, that is true. And when I came and saw you, like, like I said to you, like, oh yeah, I need to change this, whatever. You're like, nah, you're right. And we sat down and like, for me, like I think you tried to work through it from a body psychotherapy point of view, but I wasn't really ready for that. So I was just like, I want to talk about it. Like I want to just want to talk. And what you did for me was like you just accepted those parts. You're like, cool, turn it up, Luke, turn it up all the way. Like if you're playing 8 right now and like there's a 10, go all the way to 10. So we did that. We went to the 10, and I'm like, fuck it. I went all the way. And then when I started doing that, like a few months later, there's people who, said those things to me, like, it's a dark humor things, like, hey, I was envious,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man. I hear the freedom that came to you from just being able to own who you are as a person, and then that needing to break free from like other people's opinions. And I see that as like the family dynamic where like your mum and dad or your whoever else is in there saying you're not allowed to be a certain way, right? And then it replicates in your social groups.
Yeah.
And the more you step into who you really are, you force everybody else's hand to make a choice. And well, do I want to be around Luke, or do I want to fall on the sword and own
Yeah.
his jealousy or whatever else that's in there, the insecurity, the inadequacy? Because, but bro, like your presence, like can just incite. I found like just incite inadequacy as your confidence in how you speak, and you'll own if you're wrong, but you'll do it. But you got to make sure that the other person's going to be owning themselves too. Like I really see this. Truth in you, like this ability just to extract the truth, whatever that looks like. And that's why I admire working with you, and then you handling my social media side of things. Like when you see something that's off, and you just send me a message straight away and go, "Hey, John, I don't feel you in this. Like, stop that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing here. Like, this is not who you are." And then doubling back to when we first started working together, like in the characterology frame of things. You okay if we talk about the characterology?
Please go for it.
Great. So, like characterology wise, like your pathology is the psychopath, and then so in the psychopath, rigid psychopath. So I knew straight away from what I could see is I needed to build trust with you.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
me trying to force you to do the bodywork stuff when you're not ready, it was going to betray you and that trust piece. Like, yeah, because
It would have.
yeah, let's just talk it out. What do you need, bro? And just being there for you and keep on continuously expanding the validity of your world, of your reality. And then allowing you to grow in your own container. Because if I come at you like you're wrong,
Yeah.
or like there's something wrong with you and I need to make you what I think you need to be, we would not be having this conversation. I guarantee it right now.
We wouldn't. No.
Not be. So, and then in that, being able to embrace that, because the psychopathy's got the psychopath has got that pathology there, but when you transmute that shadow into a gift, it's a leader. So you're aware of your full spectrum of the malevolent side, and you can choose to be that, or your benevolent side, and you can choose to be that. But in each moment, the more emotional container that you have around who you want to be in the moment, you can go to both spectrums. Because sometimes I think the malevolent is important. You need to be able to bring that density and the ferocity in order to enact change. And I think someone who has a deeper awareness of their spectrum can make decisions which are more holistic. Otherwise, if someone's always pretending to be good or always wanting to look good, like the Obamas of the world, they're unwilling to
Right.
expose their shadow, expose like, you know what? Yeah, I ordered those drone strikes. Yeah, I did it. I did it. Yeah, I know. It killed 3,000 people. Yeah, I know. I did it. I own that. Instead of deferring it to, oh, this was the information that came through from my senior guy and this senior guy, and this was the information. No, you did the thing, right? So when you're a leader and you can own that full spectrum, it allows you just to own the humanity of yourself. Otherwise, you're trying to obfuscate it. But what do you hear for that, bro?
Yeah. Yeah, and others as well, right? Like there's so much to it in the sense of I see people like, and I've never understood this, and I have to a degree because I've used it as a tool to like get myself in a morally virtuous position. But people who like will shame other people for certain behaviors, like I get it and understand, like I understand the reasoning behind it. Like with certain topics, like I don't want to go there. With like, oh, I hate this person because they did this, or this person's a bad person, they're a murderer, these things. And I understand it's bad. But at the same time, like, I want to see that person who might be a murderer or killer or a serial killer. I'm like, I get it. I understand.
Yeah,
And people are like, what do you mean you understand? That's fucked up. It's like, no, what's fucked up is that you don't understand because the thing is that and it's a cliche Carl Jung saying, but it's like, all that part, all of humanity exists inside of you, the whole spectrum. Like you see like this what is it like a diamond, right? A diamond has multiple edges and the light reflects off multiple edges. You have those edges inside of you. You have every single edge inside of you, and it's like, how's that how's that working out for you? Because these people who are quote unquote bad, I see myself in them. Like I've seen the thoughts, I've seen the feelings, right? And it's like that hyper awareness, or rather meta awareness of awareness, where you realize, hey, I'm not too far away from that person.
yeah,
One bad turn here, or one bad turn there, or like maybe a knock on the head, which would have, stultified my prefrontal cortex or some shit like that. And I would have been that person. Or one thing here, or
yeah,
one thing there, I would have been that person. So, like a part of, and this ties back into the question you said before, like, why do I do what I do and who am I basically? That comes like the knowingness comes from the sensitivity of like the environment, right? Like it's like, and for all parents out there, like everyone, there's no point shaming someone for being a certain way. And I'm certainly not shaming my parents for this, but like I would be at my mum's place and she would be like going through her own thing, like as all humans do, going through her own thing, going through her own emotions and like stress and like being a single mom, raising two kids, like, and all the things that come with that. And she'd be stressed out and be like this stressful like environment sometimes. It was lots of fun times. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being, one-sided. Then I go to my dad's and he was like very stern and very like, then very playful. Like, I love you so much, very affectionate. And then very like just, so this emotional roller coaster. So like it was, for me to survive, I had to like learn how to read the environment very well. Like read, like, is this like how they're feeling right now? And then I would make adjustments based on that. Right. So I guess and in those adjustments, you start to realize things about yourself and about people. Like once you become sensitive to other people's feelings and emotions, you become sensitive to your own, or vice versa.
yeah.
So that awareness, right, and and in that, the dark side of that perhaps that you might be thinking of is that psychopathic rigid type, which is that because I don't trust other people's emotional states based on what they say to me, because I've always been right about how someone feels for the most part, like 99% of the time. Then when you try and play games with me, like, and you say, I'm not playing games, then I won't trust you. That's happened in the past. Like I've been like, I'm sensing you're trying to do something right now to get a certain result. You're like, yeah, I am. And it's just like, that for me is like, I've tried to see psychologists before, and this is not like a plug. I'm just purely sharing my experience. Like I've seen psychologists before, and I will see psychologists again because I think it's useful. Everyone I've gone to though has just been like, they don't understand. Like I'll just say stuff and they're just sitting there impressed by what I say, rather than like what I would like is like, you're wrong. Like you think you know everything, you're wrong. And it's like, whoa, because that says to me like you care more about integrity, you care more about being honest than you do winning my trust or winning trust. So yeah, that's what the thought process is for me around that, for sure.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, bro. And appreciate when you call me on my shit as well, right? Are you trying to do
Yeah.
this thing to me? Are you trying to do this thing to me right now? So yeah, I am. Yeah, good spot. I am trying to do that,
Yeah.
and there's that resets that honesty and transparency resets trust. Because you get suspicious as someone who has grown up in an environment. And again, bro, like parents always do their best, and then every generation of parents is going to be that little bit better. We're going to be a little
Yeah.
more emotionally aware. I mean, if we think
Sometimes.
about sometimes, for the most part, I think all that is evolutionary, all that is genetically remove themselves from the gene pool. So that's
Fair
that's
enough.
that's the other thing. It's like, well, I don't want to have kids, or the kids get so sick that they can't move beyond wherever it is that they want to go. But it's only been very recent. We've come from like World War II, so even just the war trauma for modern society in that generation, that's been filtered through. Like my granddad was in World War II, so that multi-generational trauma is still like here. But then the more we separate ourselves from civil wars and wars like that trauma is a little bit different. So it creates space for relationships to thrive. But doubling back to that awareness piece of what like, being raised in an environment where you were aware of people, your parents' emotions or whatever was going on, and it creates that anxiety and the holding back because you're in observer mode, right? And then that's a huge advantage for group situations, and especially like dating and gaming and that kind of stuff, because you can see the lay of the land, right? And there's a presence and attractive quality to being able to step back and just say, well, who's going to be the potential threats here? Who are the people that I want to get closer to? Who are the ones that I'm going to have most fun with, right? Otherwise, someone who doesn't have that awareness will run into a situation and then wonder why they're either getting hurt or unaware of the other situation, other conversations that are going on. We're talking to there, um, and you were interfacing with your family dynamic. I really feel like it touches on quantum biology, where
Quantum biology.
quantum biology. Um, and no, this isn't something where I can quantum your biology from here.
Yeah.
Um,
Joe Dispenza.
Joe Dispenza, yeah, totally. So it is an emerging field,
Mm.
and what they've discovered is that the outer cell, the cell
Mm.
membrane, is what is effectively the brain of the cell. So it's not like the nucleus of the cell's got the brain. Like we assume that our brain is the central drives and motivates us. It's the cell membrane at the quantum biology level. So that interfaces with another cell, and then there's a communication that happens there. And then that feeds into, well, what does the cell need? How does the cell need to react? So
Mm.
what I'm expanding on here is the concept of relationships, and how if we are a single cell in the body of humanity, the closer we come to someone, there's a friction there's an interface that happens, and we choose, well, do I want to have a conversation with this person? Am I attracted to this person? Like, do I have dark feelings towards it? Can I trust this person? Is this person dark? Is this person light? You know, and then with the words that you speak, so even with humor or whatever you say, there's a connection that forms when the voice lands on someone. Because if you're deaf and someone's like talking at you, there's not going to be a resonance, right?
Mm.
Someone speaks to you and the sound waves land on you, then there's what's happening to me here? What's this sensation that I'm feeling on my body that you're giving to me? Um,
Mm.
yeah, I think the last thing I want to say on that, bro.
Mm.
I mean, we can jump around topics here because when you spoke, then I'm like, all this stuff just came flooded through me that I
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Was the advantage in when you're speaking about the humor comes from a dark place
Mm.
is the distinction between the lower self and being
Mm.
trauma informed. So
Okay.
the lower self piece is when you just look at humanity and all the disgusting things, or the disgusting things, or the atrocious things that we can do to each other,
The
right?
dredge.
The dredge, right? From like all the stuff, right? a lot of the stuff that people go to jail for. When you can see your ability to have that monster inside of you, that's lower
Mm-hmm.
self work. And then when you um, act that out in a clinical situation or a therapeutic situation, which is what I facilitate in the deep end of work that I do, it creates bandwidth in your body to create it creates bandwidth in the body that allows the thoughts to exist without the impulse to act them out.
Mm.
So if you haven't done lower self work, what can, like what you were mentioning before, like you're one step away from like being one of those people.
Oh yeah.
That one step away can also be anonymity. So if you're in a dark room, or if there's a way to hide your name or hide your face, and those are the crimes of opportunity that are typically in family systems where there's sexual assault or pedophilia, that's what plays out. So within the anonymity piece and pedophilia and sexual assault, like statistically, I just found this out yesterday in another podcast. Um, it's children under the age of 18 that are the initiators and the ones that the
Instigators.
instigators of sexual assault. So there's this huge age range under 18 that is responsible for a lot of sexual assaults, and we don't address it. We don't speak to it. So
Mm.
what I see is there's an element of innocence that's playing out here with parents that don't know how to healthily address sexuality to a child. So what's happening, yeah, right. So what's happening is these kids are growing up, their biological urges, the meat suit is activating their attraction, their desire, their sexual, that juiciness, and then it gets acted out on either siblings or
Mm.
other people in their environment where they think they can get away with it, right?
Well, I think that's a huge part. I think here's the thing, right? It's like you talk about the pelvic split, right? Meaning you've separated yourself from like you've separated your experience from the emotion, right? When I hear that, that's what I hear, right? And I feel like we've separated ourselves from our animalistic nature, meaning not just on a health level, not just on like a wellness level of like you need to get in nature or you need to go around all these things. Like I'm talking about at a fundamental core. We've naturally come into the world, I think, and about maybe at the age 5 or 6, we become human and not animal anymore. Meaning, like, make sure you wear shoes, or like, there's a proper way to talk, a proper way to do this. And here's the thing: you need formalities. You need everything has utility. You need to be like, "Hello, how are you?" But you can't have formalities unless you have informalities, which is the darkness sitting in the corner, right? And a part of me is hesitant to say this because it sounds so cliche and probably oversaid in the audience that's listening right now. What I'm speaking to though is like an example. Here's an analogy, right? When animals go into zoos, right, they often experience something called zoochosis. Zoochosis is when they start, cutting themselves. They start to like self-mutilate. They start to like rock back and forth. They do all these things, right? These animals start doing this. What happens to humans when they experience mental health issues? When you think of a psychotic person, a person who's in asylum, right? What are they doing against the wall? They cutting themselves, they're self-mutilating, they're doing the same thing, right? So what's to say that humans aren't experiencing their own version of zoochosis, right? And I mean, on every level, right? So we're sitting here right now. I'm in this room. I've got a table here. I've got a screen here. There's a grass section out here that is built all around all these buildings, right? So are we in what is required for humans to thrive, or are we living in a zoo of some sort? Who created the zoo? Why does the zoo exist, right? And how can we counteract with the zoo? Now, in the context of what you're speaking about there with, people with a darker side and whatnot, we're sitting in a world now that's unhealthy because we're in the zoo, but also we're not addressing those parts of us that were expressed in nature, right? Screaming, shouting, yelling, running. Like you feel anxious, you fucking run. Like you flight or fight, you run. Like you're sitting around the campfire, you're having like you're doing all these kind of things that you would do, right? You're sitting at nighttime with a group of like And of course, I'm using an idealistic version of what hunter-gatherer lifestyle was, but on
Yeah.
average, the tribe was a minimum of 4 people, around 4 to, I think it was about 150 from memory, right? And then they would hunt and gather as they went along. There was the male role, the female role. Oh, controversial, wow. But there was
Yeah.
a male and female role. They had their things. Women, they gathered. Men, they hunted. Hence why we have the proclivities that we do. We can get into more details on that. But we'd sit at the campfire at nighttime, around a fire that's specifically red light exposure, which is known to not decrease melatonin, right? It helps to continue the process of releasing melatonin because we have been genetically, selected for that, right? So what I'm trying to say is that like we have all these experiences that naturally allowed us to release what was a part of us, that primalistic, animalistic nature. And now we've been boxed in like animals. So I wonder, are we experiencing zoochosis?
That's a great question. And I haven't heard of zoochosis before. And as you were speaking there, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, on multiple levels. So I see not only in like a housing structure, like we're housing, living in a house, and then having screens towards bedtime instead of the nighttime, natural starlight and sunlight, but
And
also
fire.
and fire, right? And a zoochosis on our own bodies, where we're trying to control, like the body itself is a zoo, and you're trying to contain all of your impulses to try and be rigid or perfect or whatever it is. And then like you might feel an impulse, like you might see an attractive woman and you'll feel the urge, you'll feel this thing come out that's like, oh yeah, well, she's really attractive. But instead of just acknowledging that feeling and owning it for what it was, religiosity,
Religiosity. You said it right the first
yeah,
time.
like classic zoo. So while I see that dogma and teachings that have attempted to try and curtail these like morality and try and bring in rules to control the lower self, you can't control the lower self. It needs to be acknowledged and felt like the higher self and the myself. And we see that where the more you control someone, especially in a religious scenario, they lash out sexually, like trying to maintain celibacy for extended periods of time without not genuinely trusting yourself and choosing that, yeah, you know what, I'm going to be celibate because I want to do something else. Like I want to be celibate because I want to focus on my business or do something else. So you choose to be celibate under this doctrine, which is a denial of yourself. And then the more you deny yourself, the more you are going to cut yourself, the more you are going to become more depressed or bipolar or whatever the acronym that's going around today that's the most prolific to ease and validate who you are, right? So, yes, in short, yes, I think we are from zoochosis. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also as well, like, so I'll tell you a story. I was in Tasmania in June 2021, and we went and stayed in a place called Burnie, which is northwestern Tasmania, right? And for anyone who lived in Tasmania or has been there before, you will know that on the east side of Tasmania is where they've all the trees, all the old, same as any civilization, all the trees, all the old school, all the trees have been cut down and, modern living and great. I think there's space for that for sure. I'm not against that. I'm not like a tree hugger who thinks that, we ought to not mess with nature and that we're scum to this earth and we're destroying the earth. I don't believe that at all. But on the east side, you have that. On the west side, you have a lot of the old forests, like that hasn't been touched by white men. Some of the places, right? This thick forest, right? Anyways, context. So I was driving. I think it was from Burnie, which is northwest, down to Hobart, which is more south of Tasmania. And we're driving along, and I point out to these trees, like these. I said to Anthony, who was the guy I was with, "My look at those trees. Like it'd be beautiful to go in there." And he's like, "Those aren't trees." He goes, "They're 200 years old. They're trees, but they're 200 years old. The trees that exist on the western side there, I don't know what year it was, but he said like they're thousands of years old. Some of them have been walked through. Some of them hasn't been touched before, right? So we've been living in this society and this way of living that our identification with what is real and authentic and visceral is even skewed to some degree. What I consider as a tree isn't, it's a tree, but it's an example of a young tree. To the discerning eye that knows nature and knows humanity and knows themselves and knows what it means to be human in all its full expression, when you say, "Oh, I'm feeling sadness," that's not sadness. That's something else. That's something deeper, right? So it's almost like we're trying to find solutions on top of a mountain of shit. It's like we're sitting here and we're talking about, and this is where science, it can go wrong. And it's like we're sitting here diagnosing someone with the DMS, 5, whatever it's up to now, saying you have ADHD, you have bipolar, but we're diagnosing on the basis of what we currently know in reaction to the environment we currently live. So it's like, at what point does the surrounding environment take precedent over the diagnosis? So it's like, okay, put me into nature, put me in what we would assume is a natural environment. Again, there's exaggerations of this. You can go down to like how a Scandinavian lived, where I'm from, would, certain 1,000 years ago, whatever it is, and put me in that environment and then measure who I am. Or if you're, Asian or something like that, you can do it that way. My point is, it's like, how do you know someone is suffering from something unless you put them in the natural environment of which they are determined to be in to then determine if they're that person, right? So it's like, what is the real problem, right? And I'm not saying we should throw out modernity and we should just be all of a sudden, barefoot, and there's a reason we are why we are right now. But
Totally.
all I'm saying is it's something to think about, and it's very, very interesting to think about because you start then questioning the hierarchy that we live in. And I'm not saying conspiratorial. I'm just saying, like, what is the system we have set up? Why does it exist the way it is? What is the nature of humanity behind why we got here? That's what fascinates
Yeah.
me. So,
Yeah. I love that, Luke. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, the piece that speaks to me about that is the Gene Key 3 speaks to this, where at some point we've been afraid of chaos.
yes.
So what I see is, as humans, we've got to a point of I don't want to be out of control anymore. Like, you come out of that caveman style. It's like, cool, like fire, great. Fire creates structure. You get a place to go to now. You have a meeting point to go to. Cool, I'll meet you by the fire, right? And then fire evolves into, well, now it's we just all build our little tents around the fire. I mean, in Tasmania, I don't know how much you know of Tasmania's past, but they annihilated the indigenous population there, like
Yep.
annihilated them. And speaking to that, the lower self component of the human condition, they justified annihilating them because they saw them as less than because of how they lived, right?
They want to be squeaky clean.
Want to be squeaky clean, right? But the indigenous population in Tasmania were one of the few Aborigines that had huts. Like, they actually had
Wow.
huts. So they knew this. Huts show a level of intelligence that is on par with what you build structures, because a lot of the indigenous population was nomadic.
Well,
So
it's also because it was cold down there as well.
that makes perfect sense too, right? So
Yeah.
in the mainland, they were all nomadic. So I was like, okay, they don't have any houses, they're not civilized, but they were much more civilized, but in a separate way, right? And
And
then
is it just quickly? Isn't that
yeah,
indicative of what we're talking about right now? It's like one denying their own origins, right? Because that's what
totally.
happens, right? They're thinking, oh, these people are like, look at them, they're animals. It's like you do realize that's how we were in the same way. But just
Exactly.
and there's reasons behind this. There's reasons why there's some civilizations that advance quicker than others. You can read a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, I think it is. Yeah, Jared Diamond. And he talks about why certain parts of the world advance quicker. And there's actual reason behind it. It's not just like arbitrary, like, oh, white people are more intelligent. It's like there's actually a reason behind those specific lands, the dirt, the soil, the materials, and the access to certain things. But just
Yeah,
want to add
wow.
that in.
I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's really important. I think there's a, and I've done this, where you romanticize the past.
Yes.
It's like, oh no, let's go back to Stone Age, let's like
Of
go and
course.
hunt again. And there's this romantic, but no, like back then you lived to your 30s tops.
On average. On
on
average. Yeah.
average,
Yeah.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
average, right? So putting aside the romanticizing of the past, being able to look at what worked and what didn't work, what does work and what does work and doesn't work now, you can start bringing back some of that stuff, like being outside more, red light, um, slowing down, being in nature, and then not throwing the baby out with the bathwater of all technology too, because with technology comes advancement and longevity in health. There's understanding of the world that we live in instead of just assuming it's all magic,
With
right?
what do you really want? Like, what do you want?
Exactly. What do you
Do
want?
you, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
like
that,
maybe you actually want to live in nature, like, So I just want to
exactly.
speak into that because there's no wrong or right way. Like, technology exists here. But if you decide you just don't want to use technology, you have that choice. But
Yeah,
don't complain about technology and then also say that you have to use it. It's like you always have a choice. So,
totally. And I think that's a huge piece of hypocrisy. Like, well, do you know who you are?
mm,
Well,
mm.
if you know who you are, you just choose it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that's the piece when people do have a lot of mental illness, it gets overdiagnosed, and we do have a huge overdiagnosis of mental illness. Um,
Mm.
so, can you trust yourself? Like straight up. Like if you make a decision, do you know it's you making the decision, or are you using just a bunch of information that you've got? Do you know what you want?
And can you trust when not to trust yourself?
Exactly, exactly.
Mm.
Which I think is the disconnect with the heart and pelvic split that you mentioned before. So you
Yeah.
have that built-in desire, that sexual hunger and whatever it is, and then you've got your physical edible hunger, and then you've got
Mm.
whatever your cerebellum's telling you, whatever your mind is telling you. It's like, no, this is how I was raised. This is how my parents have told me how I need to be. Go to school, go to university, get a job, get a mortgage, get married, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah,
retire.
yeah.
And at some point, I can live my life. And that's the fucking lie. It's like you can choose right now to live your life, but you need to make the choice about what it is that you want to let go of and what it is that you want to invite.
Yeah. And that's what we've done together. You and I, we've unpacked all that stuff, like because I think this is the thing as well. It's like there's this big thing in the spiritual community. Now I'm pretty sure this is being live to your Facebook, so probably people that are in that community will hear it. But
Yeah.
there's this big thing in the community of like doing the work, right? And like getting this stuff done. Like I'm doing the work, but then you look at what the work actually is, and it's just all like this light stuff of like I'm meditating every single day. I'm doing ecstatic dance, 3 times a week. I'm doing a men's circle that like just we talk about X, Y, Z. And I think sometimes, at least for me, like the work has been so much of like the willingness to step into that dark place, and not just the willingness, but like that getting off on being in that dark place. And I don't mean getting off as in like, oh, I kind of like it. No, like I love being there. Like I actively seek it out. Like that dark period. And I love being a victim. I love fucking, like, oh, John, this is going on for me. What do I do? And it's just like, oh, I know I'm playing this game of like, I just want someone to validate my experience. Like, tell me I'm not crazy. So like all these parts, all these elements, like you have all these things to you. And even like, playing dumb with it and just like, and getting off on being that way and being all the parts of you like they are part of you, right? And this is what you've taught me. This is the biggest lesson, the biggest takeaway from our work, is that you've shown me that it's okay to be what is me in that moment of any type. It's like, cool, I feel this way, I feel that way. I've told you some dark shit and you're like, nice. And it's ironic because if someone were to say the same thing to me, I'd be like, cool, awesome.
Yeah.
What is worse than not being honest? I don't mean honest in like the moralistic, like knee jerk, not even knee jerk, but the moralistic anti knee jerk, which is like, I have to say the right thing. I have to
Mm.
do the right thing right now. Hey, I did X and it made me feel X. It's like, no.
The
It's
gushy,
like,
the gushy emotional.
yeah, yeah, like the what's that non-violent communication stuff, right? Which everything has its place. I'm not degrading. I'm just saying like you have like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system structure of how you present problems to other people, and like you do that, and then it's like, oh great, like we had this great communication, but it's like, what about that part of you that just wants to rip someone's head off, or someone like you're just angry or pissed off? You showed me like how I can be that person and be that logical side of me as well, and just being okay with anything. Like, hey, I feel fucking annoyed right now. Like the stuff I'm saying on this call right now, like a year ago, 2 years ago, more 2 years ago, I'd say I wouldn't say any of this stuff. It's like this is a presentation, and I'm here to sell myself a certain way. But the best selling
Mm.
of oneself is to be oneself, and oneself is found through the gutter, like the darkness, the willingness to work with someone who's going to show you and point out when you're fucking bullshitting yourself. It's like you're a dark person. Come on, just be that person. Stop being afraid. Stop being a pussy about it. Like just jump
Yeah.
into it. So, anyways,
Yeah, man, that's great. Thank you. Yeah,
you
I
wouldn't get
really.
it.
That's what Carl Jung would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Jordan, that was word for word Jordan Peterson, bro. It wasn't even original.
Yeah, yeah. Nice, nice. I am Jordan Peterson.
I am Jordan Peterson, puppet. But yeah,
Yeah,
I totally agree, Luke. And the dark and in the spiritual community, the heaviness, not being able to be with the heaviness of the darkness, is what I think a lot of people are afraid of.
yeah,
It's being able to own that your genetic lineage, like where you've come from, is from the gutter, right?
mm-hmm.
You have in your genes, you would have killed other tribes, you have torn the heads off people. You have done that. Stop pretending that in your evolutionary genetic journey you didn't kill people or hurt people
I'd go
or
a step
rape
further
people.
and I say a step further in saying that you are that person still, and
Yeah,
quite honestly, like you have those, if there wasn't civilization in place, and it's here for a reason. I agree with that. I'm not saying get rid of it, but I'm saying if there wasn't these, consequences for your actions in the way there is right now, you would be still doing those things.
totally. I love that you mentioned that, bro. And this is the fear that comes from authority, right? So if you're someone
Yeah,
who completely owns themselves and you have the awareness of the full breadth of your darkness and your lightness, the need for authority diminishes and external authority diminishes because you understand how the cycle of life works.
yes, yeah. You think full circle. You know
You
that
think,
if
oh,
you actually do that, that will happen down the line. And it's like,
exactly.
yeah. But when you don't
Yeah.
know, you're making judgments based on false imagery, so to speak. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen because I haven't acknowledged that part of me. So when you acknowledge all these parts of yourself, or at least you attempt to, you know that every action you take has a consequence, and therefore you know the right way to integrate it and not integrate it. So
100%. And I think that's very scary for people to even believe that that kind of reality exists, considering the amount of the systems that we have right now with the police and law and institutions and university and credentials and all these things the hoops that we jump through in order to be a good citizen, when deep down, if given the opportunity, that you'd pull the trigger on someone,
yeah,
right? So just own that. Like if everybody just owned that there's a demon inside of them, a multiple demons, a legions of demons inside of them, it would be okay.
how does
Because
one do that though?
how does one do? That's a great question. So first of all, you need to find someone or something that allows you to be present with the evil that's inside of you. So there are people that specialize in the lower self. I'm one of them. And in order to do that, you need to acknowledge that you have fantasies.
Hmm.
Tell me your dreams. What's really going on for you? Do you dream at all? And then in those moments where I take you into a psychodynamic of your past, and usually exes are a really good example of this. When if you really that drill down to how you feel towards an ex, there might be a part of you that wants to like strangle them.
Of
And
course,
and
yeah.
then even further still, like your parental dynamic. And then sometimes we externalize that, and people that look really peaceful in a car, so it looked really peaceful in real life, like really spiritual bypasses. You put them in a car and someone cuts them off, they turn into a raging lunatic behind the wheel, right?
And we spoke about this before, right? We had that one person was speaking about who was, like the most stoic, meditative person of like just like most calm person, and you when you're around them, you're like, wow, you're so calm. But when you really dig deep, you can see that calmness is an exterior for fucking rage inside. It's just like like let me out. And then when one thing goes wrong, like as I mentioned, what happened, like so this thing happened, and then this one thing went wrong, and it was just like this complete turnaround. It's like, wow, there you are, thank you, like
There you
thank you for
are.
showing me who you are,
Yeah,
and
there
it's
you are.
liberating.
It's so liberating. It's so liberating. And once you find that freedom,
Mm,
it changes your life. You see life differently, you see rules differently, you see everything differently, and it's freeing. When you're trying to maintain that facade of no, I need to be perfect, it's exhausting, and that's the
mm.
psychosis. Like your body becomes a trap because you've got this
Compartmentalization.
command. Yeah, totally. Right.
Mm.
Or you try and use other systems to bypass it. Right. You use astrology, you use other things without without fully grasping that you are a very complex, multifaceted individual, and just
Mm.
relying on one system to um, validate your behavior as a half life. So if someone gets really angry in the car, that person, for example, so it's an Aries moon this week, that's why I'm angry. No, you are a naturally angry person and you're denying it, and then you just used an external bypass
I
to
hate that. Yeah.
acknowledge. It's like, no, there's a monster inside of you, and the sooner that you own it, the freer that you will be, and you'll actually attract people into your life that want to love the genuine part of you instead of this
Mm.
fucking facade.
Yeah, yeah. That's something I really admire about you. Like, this acceptance, this what's this word I'm looking for? Yeah, self acceptance. Like, there's like not one thing that's like really, uh, yeah, it just seems like this integration. Like, you're able to see other people's shit, and it's just like you're like cool with it, you know. Um, so yeah, I can see that with you, man. Like, and I'd love for you to share more about your journey. I know this is your podcast, but I'd love to hear more. Like, this is a genuine question I would ask outside of this because I'm
Yeah.
just seeing this as a conversation. I'd love to hear how, like, if you ever did, like, I know there's judgment all the time, but if is there a previous version of John that people don't know about, like
Oh,
that?
fuck yeah.
I'd love to hear about that because I don't. I've seen some of your content, right? So I edit John's content as you mentioned before. And I've seen some of it with the longer hair and stuff, and it was a bit different. You were a lot more sharper, as in not sharp in like a witty way, but sharp in like a. Well, this guy seems like a a bit annoyed or something. I don't know. Like, this is like years ago I'm talking about. So I'd
Yeah.
love for you to share, like, just for my own interest as well, and everyone listening,
Yeah,
I
like
imagine.
like super rigid, bro. So for me, like my characterology, um, working backwards. So psychopath, rigid, passive feminine man, um, and then masochist, and then schizoid. So
I
it
love that,
all
by the way. So, like, you would say you're more feminine, right?
my default is feminine. Yeah.
Like, how good is that? Like, no men these days who like the Andrew Tateys and all those people. And I love Andrew Tate, by the way, but like, no one would say I'm feminine. It's like, no, John, you need to be masculine. There's a whole legion of men out there that are changing their whole archetypal nature to be more masculine. So I love that you just fucking own that, and it's like there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's fine. So,
Totally. And dude, it works. Like you've seen Cassie, like
mm,
like would she be with a passive feminine man? I don't know. I don't think so, bro.
mm,
Like
mm,
I think she sees my leadership, and I
mm.
would love to get her on a podcast too, bro. I think there's a part of my relationship that I really love to expose. Maybe you could do the interview. That'd be great.
Maybe
Um,
you can get on right now.
get on Luca, bro, and I'm talking right now.
Yeah.
But in all of that journey to become who I am today, so who I
Mm.
was, um, someone who was very rigid, had a lot of masks. So not knowing who I was, so stuck in that loop of not really after leaving, like, even during school, bro, not really enjoying school, choosing the things that I enjoyed, like music and whatever class that I was good at, I'll just excel more at. And then leaving school, not going to university, and just starting to work straight away because my dad said I needed to work. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll go find a job, right? And I
Mm.
found a job through my auntie who worked in an advertising agency, and I worked in the film industry. And for me, like when I'm loyal to something, when I do something, when I agree to do something, I'll do it for decades. That
Wow.
that's my rigidity and not understanding the part of me that needed to trust myself and change my path. So in that had lots of had a relationship that was long distance,
I just want
and
to highlight that quickly. Sorry, sorry to interrupt. I just want to
yeah,
highlight that part just quickly there. So, rigidity is what happens when one experiences rigidity is they blunt their natural intuition. So I just want to highlight that part because it's a really important part. Because anyone who's like super rigid, like structure all the time, like like for me, it's always structure. Like, things need to be here and there, but that blunts what's right for you intuitively. I just wanted to highlight that.
thank you, Luke. I really appreciate that deep listening that you have.
Mm,
Yeah, because I will justify
mm,
continuing on that same path, even though my body is screaming no. Like my soul is dying. But I have a mortgage to pay for. I want to have a nice car. I want to go out and eat. I want to be able to buy whiskey. I want to be able to
Want to
look.
impress my dad.
Impress my impress my dad, impress my mum. I was the first sibling to buy a house. I bought my house at 26, right?
Wow.
Bought my first car cash at 26, brand new. So for me, all of those accolades are like, yeah, John, like you're winning at life, but just like completely disconnected from my body. I gamed, bro. I spent thousands of hours gaming World of Warcraft, real-time strategy games, even
It's hot.
from a very early age. So even sports, bro, I got into sports because my dad said I needed to get into sports. And then I had a friend that said, John, why don't you join our cricket team? I just wanted to play with him. And I played cricket for like a season or so. I fucking hated it. But I showed up to every game. I was 12th.
Wow.
I would volunteer to be 12th man like every second game. I hated it, but I was just in it. I didn't know how to quit. Because
Wow.
for me, quitting was like I'm failing. So
Mm.
at what point did the rigid will just keep on going until they die? They just brittle. Their bones break. And for me, I've had low bone density. So at my age, I should not have the level of bone density that I do. But I sat in offices. I drank coffee. I ignored my body for such a long time because I was achieving. I was being this guy that I thought everyone needed me to be, the savior, the analyst, the specialist. Um,
Mm.
that's that's an old version of John that still creeps up every now and then.
Mm.
My discipline is like I don't need to do any more research. I've had enough life experience to look down my timeline and I can draw on all that.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and that's the piece that shows up. But like, dude, a massive nice guy. Like the
Yeah.
passive feminine man in characterology, massive nice guy. He's got he's energetically done tien, like all of his stomach is just full of disgust. So a lot of the inner work that I did, like my ex mentor, that I don't really like associating with because of his past, um, took me through like weekend after weekend after weekend of inner work, like deep body work, lower self work, where like throwing up, like hitting things, bawling my eyes out like a little baby, tantruming on the floor, stomping, biting, tearing, all the
Really?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, bro. So
What drove you to do that? Like, what was the motivation to even start that?
yeah, great. So my ex at the time, I was a full time carer for her for a few years. That was a humbling experience. Being taken care of someone who's bedbound, can't wash herself, can't drag herself to the toilet, couldn't take herself to doctor's interviews. Yeah, bro, it was a hectic time. I met my mentor when she was selling her book on like a mind body spirit festival. I was so cynical, bro, of mind body spirit festival, but I was just there because she was there and she was cute and she was intelligent. So I was just there with her until she got chronically ill. Her chronic illness took over. Um, but I met him there, and we were supposed to go to a few of his workshops, and then I went to one of his workshops when our relationship started coming to an end. My ex at the time, my partner at the time, and he did a process with me about my future self, my present self, and my past self, and it blew my mind. And in that, it was who do you want to be, John? I was like, cool. I want to go into politics. Before I was didn't do now, I was going to go into politics.
Wow. That's
So
interesting.
yeah, so I'd actually um, inquired in a local MP, local minister, if I could be mentored by him. But he said he couldn't do that for me. So I flipped into doing what I'm going to do now, what I'm doing now. But in all of that, he showed me who I could be as a politician, and I felt
Mm.
powerful, bro. Like he did this little process, and I was walking around like I was speaking with such confidence and in an authority that was potent. And I need to work with you. Let's do it. So I signed. I spent like 15 grand on one, just in that one sitting without a heartbeat. The money was there. I knew what I wanted. He was the guy. Just did it. And then that was his initial course. And then I upgraded to a new one, spent like another 10, 15 grand. And then that's when I started doing more of the mentorship, doing what I do now.
Wow.
Um, and that the drive, that was a part, the rigid drive of like, I'm going to get to the end of this, I'm going to get this achievement. And then once I got addicted to the lower self, like the power and the freedom that came from owning the darkness, I knew it's the thing. So I did that for as long as I needed to, until my relationship with my mentor decayed, and then I pulled out.
Wow, man. Wow. So you've been through it, man. Like, it's so easy to see someone in who they currently are right now being like, oh, like, wow, it's so amazing how you're so, how do you say, at peace with yourself, or this or that, or even finances or business, whatever. But it's like, and speaking to business, right? Like right now, going through the trenches of business and like day in, day out, all these different things coming up and learning all these different blind spots that I didn't know I had. And then like you see someone, it's like, oh, wow, I want to do a business. And it's like, wow, are you sure you want that? Like, are you sure you really want that? And it's like, so you've had that journey for yourself. But I just wanted to like, I wanted to throw something by you. I just saw someone in the comments. I didn't even know these comments coming up because I had it on full screen.
Oh, yeah.
Love this, pity here at work. Did someone
Mm.
say that? Did they want to come onto this? I mean, like, no, honestly, not trying to be mean. I mean, if you're open to it, they want to come onto this chat and like speak about that. I'd love to hear about what they're saying. If we can do that,
Yeah. How do
this is your thing, man. I don't want to take over, but
Yeah,
like,
bruh. I don't know how to do that. How do I do that?
um,
I see the comment there. It looks
we
like
can tag him.
there's
Yeah,
a chat overlay. So how do I find it?
it should be at the bottom part. It says turn on chat overlay, or the top.
Oh yeah,
It's the
chat
right
overlay.
section.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And we can edit this post, but
yeah, I got
love
that.
this pity here at work. I'd love for that person to come on the call and like have a chat, like, because if there is, I'd love to hear what he or she is saying. I just don't know who it is. Anyways, up to you, man. I'm just throwing some suggestions out there, like, because it's really cool, like, to see these chats come up and then interact with them. And if anyone has any questions, then put them in there. I'd love to. I know people listening. I can't see, but anyways, just thought I'd put it out
Yeah,
there.
there's a function where you can get the other person to plug in Restream
Mm,
into their Facebook, and then their name pops up. So I'm so
right.
keen to
Play with that. Yeah.
play with that. Yeah, bro, because I hear that, man. Like I
Yeah.
hear the like the here at work piece, and I've been that guy too. Like always wanting that feeling, like feeling that I want to be doing something else and then not doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I quit my corporate job, that was huge for me. Like my whole family was like, John, why are you quitting your corporate job? Like I pretty much paid off my unit in Castle Hill. Like
Phew.
I bought it for 420K, and I
You're
just like,
so successable, John. Good
so
job.
successful, John, so successful. And then like and then um when I did that, like it was so freeing for me, knowing
Mm,
that I've jumped into the abyss of that. But then jumped into a new abyss of having of this partnership that I was in, and that was my ex at the time, that woman that I was with that got that had the chronic illness. That was a
mm.
baptism by fire in relationships.
It
Um,
was what, sir?
a baptism by fire
Yeah,
in
yeah. Same with
relationships.
my health stuff.
Right, right, right. So, like, dude, like, I'd love to speak about this in another podcast, like that whole relationship, because that was a humbling experience for me. Like, I used to be so critical of people that had chronic illnesses. Like, just get better. Just sort it out, right?
Do the thing.
Just do the thing. Like, just take a pill. And then the medical system as well. So I was with her through so many specialists, and then navigating like the DSP and NDIS, the government structure of like needing to be approved to getting government assistance, the
Yeah.
hoops that need to be jumped through for that, how the system's not
Fucking
set up.
nuts.
Yeah, how the system's not set up for chronic illness. It's set up for like end of lifestyle illnesses. Um, dude, there's so much I could speak to about that, and that journey with that woman,
Mm.
um, that I think would really shed light on my um, yeah, my past.
Yeah, well, I mean, so just speaking of chronic health, and we can go into that now if you want to. I don't know how
Yeah,
you are for time.
yeah,
Um, but to speak to chronic health, right? Like, luckily for me, I had a natural criticism towards, not criticism, but critical of the government and whatnot. So I wouldn't go down that path. I'm like, I refuse to like, go to see a psychiatrist and all these things. But with my health stuff, like that was wild, man. And still, like, there's ups and downs at the moment. Like, sometimes it comes, sometimes it goes. But for the most part, there is a solution out of it. But it's not the government, I don't think, because it's too rigid. It's too like medication is everything, and like medication for this, medication for that. The paradigm that I'm playing in is nutritional, like supplements, those kind of things, and like over 6 to 9 months, not masking the problem so you can function. But I'd love to hear your journey and what you learned from that relationship, man, if you want to share.
yeah, yeah. I guess what I learned from the medical system in particular is that GPs do not have enough time to sit with you and work through like a
15
diagnosis.
minutes?
15 minutes tops. That's not what they're set up for. So, and then they refer you to specialists who are exactly the same, who they'll charge you an arm and a leg to get like some shoebox type diagnosis, and it's all cookie cutter. It's all cookie cutter type treatment plans. So we needed to do all this research for autoimmune, all this research. What the hell? No one knew what this the stuff on autoimmune is such a black hole. No one was interested in gut. No one was interested in gut health like a few years ago. Um,
Yep.
so that was in the mix as well. Trauma. So like
Body
ACE,
work?
her body, her yeah, totally. Like her ACE score was in like the high, approaching 10.
The
Like
ACE score? What's that?
adverse childhood experience.
Oh,
So it's an
right.
instrument. It's an instrument that you can use to grade what your trajectory of chronic illness is. It's they studied. I can't remember how many children that they studied, but they tracked the outcomes of children that had high scores. Like I think when you get to like 3, it doubles your chance of heart disease. It's
Right.
insane. Like this is all childhood trauma from parents fighting. If you had a caregiver that went to jail, if there was sexual abuse, all this kind of stuff, and
I've heard
neglect.
this before. They ask you a bunch of questions like, did your parents divorce or whatever it is, and that's they do a score on that. Right.
Yeah, so the ACE scores. So you could use ACE scores as early intervention for children at school. So by the time they get to their teenage years, you can see, oh, this kid's actually higher risk of heart disease, high risk of cancer and autoimmune. Like you can actually head
Crime.
things off at the pass instead of being reactionary when they come to a doctor's surgery. And they've got so many people I know have gone through this process where they go to a GP. What are your symptoms? Oh, this. Okay, cool with this. Take this, or wait it out, and then a few years later, like they end up with some kind of chronic illness that was not that they weren't unable to treat earlier on.
The medical merry-go-round.
The totally. I mean, there was one guy, an immunologist that we found in Brisbane, in Queensland, who was doing groundbreaking work on mast cell stabilization. So, what he found, and this is genius, because she was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is CFS, the short form CFS. But CFS has had so many the diagnostic criteria for chronic fatigue syndrome includes depression. So you need the proper criteria. And if the criteria is wrong, you get lumped in with a whole bunch of other people, right?
Right.
So it's like you go to the doctor and you tell them your symptoms, and you get diagnosed with ADHD when you really have depression, right?
Mm.
So this guy, this immunologist, discovered that your nose is the early warning threat detector. So as a child, if you have had lots of initial trauma as a child, you are oversensitized to threat. So what happens is instead of your body perceiving a real threat and just responding normally, like, okay, cool, that's a threat, it's okay. It sees everything as a threat and then initiates this cytokine cascade in your body that triggers an inflammation response, which puts or prepares your body for an autoimmune disease. So you can walk into a room, feel threatened, triggers a cytokine cascade because your body's all rewired because of the threat receptors. Insane. So the treatment was experimental, and it was a drug that was used to reduce the sensitivity of the mast cells in the nose, and that really helped her. So she would
Wow.
manage her symptom picture. So if she knew that she was going to go into a stressful environment or there was a new carer that was coming around, she'd have a hit of this. It was a nasal spray, and she was able to remain calm. She was able to remain focused. She didn't have what's known as post exertional fatigue. So
Wow.
you do an activity, it feels great, but then like 3 hours later, this wave of exhaustion hits you. And post-exertional malaise and post-exertional fatigue are symptom pictures of chronic fatigue and myalgic encephalomyelitis. But anyway, back
Wow.
to my story. Like, bro, learning that there's complexities in the human body that science hasn't even touched on yet. But I could see it in her body. Like, her lived experience was not being validated by institutions, which not only created this crazy making in her head for me, and like me reassuring her, no, this is real. I see this is going on in your body. You can't fake this. You can't fake that you can't eat food. You can't fake that, because she loved food, right? So my journey through all of that's been, I see the institutions for what they are. And then when I studied with my mentor, I started to see what psychological institutions, like the psychiatry world, for what it was, right? And in my family dynamic, like, I've got family members who work in biotech. I've got family members that work in psychotherapy as well. And what's not being spoken about in a lot of those worlds is the disconnect, that they're ignoring the body, that they're ignoring there's things that can be done. A lot of the illnesses are lifestyle illnesses, but because they're so profitable, they don't try and head it off at the pass. A lot of these biotech companies have drugs that are for gout and for things that are lifestyle type diseases, right? But back to the psychotherapy piece, family members that are in psychotherapy, I'm erring into some spiritual stuff here,
Please.
is there's, um, especially in psychiatric wards, there's phenomenon that go on there that are unexplainable. And there's been examples that are kept on the down low of them inviting in like indigenous spiritual workers to cleanse areas in psychiatric wards, because there's something that's there that patients are reacting to that's not measurable by science. But when they invite indigenous spiritual area cleansers in the area, the patients start to respond like a little bit more normal. So we're teetering on this world of, okay, cool. There's science, the nuts and bolts of science. There's what's going on in the body, and then there's this spiritual other component here, which I think we're all coming to a point of, it's all interwoven. And what is the truth for you?
Well, there's so many things I want to say with that, right? There's some huge, huge things. Firstly, with that spiritual stuff, I'm certainly open to it, but I'd love to understand, was it a placebo effect? Did they
Totally.
think something happened?
I get
Do
it.
you know what I
Totally
mean?
get it, bro. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no double blinds. And I guess it's one of those things, bro, where it's like, put it in your drawer. You wouldn't get it, but put it in your
Yeah.
bag and put it over there in the corner, because I think it's a Pandora's box that I don't think society and civilization is not ready to unpack just yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we've just gone from, oh, what? The gut has its own brain? What do you mean the gut has its own brain? What do you mean gut health is important for your mental health? So I think we're at that point right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think that all science is predicated on the presumption of intuition and faith, so to speak. There's a
Yeah.
feeling or intuition, what's there? And that's the inquiry part. So I think for anyone who's a rigid scientist or perhaps thinks that way, myself included, you ought to remember that it starts on faith, right? It starts on like, I know something's there, and I'm going to use the methodology of science. There's a process to find the answer out, right? So, on what you said before, right? Here's something really cool, and I might butcher the. This is very what I'm going to say is very general, right? But it's general because I don't know the specifics. But I want to share this. It's really cool, right? When you chew food, and it ties into your with your ex there. When you chew food, um, there's how do I put it this way? When you're chewing food, or when you don't chew food more properly, more precisely, and you swallow that food, it doesn't digest properly, right? And then the peptides from the food, they can sit along your GI tract, right? As they sit along your GI tract, they can destroy your gut lining, right? And this is where it gets crazy. Once it starts destroying your gut lining, right, you have no barrier between the villi, which is the sections in your gut where the food goes in, look like this, like little V's, villi, will will go straight through to there rather than processing the food properly, right? So you have particles of the food then going to your bloodstream. So when there's something in your bloodstream that shouldn't be there, what does your immune system do?
Attack it. Yeah.
Autoimmune. Has an autoimmune response, right? On top of that, when you have foods like emulsifiers, it proliferates a bacteria called Enterobacteriaceae, right? And this Enterobacteriaceae eats your gut lining, essentially, your mucus and your gut lining. When you have no gut lining, your villi then gets inflamed. When it gets inflamed, food particles get through. So when you have that feeling, that weird feeling after you eat, that's the food, the particles of the food inside of your blood, which then causes an autoimmune response, which then full circle, right? You're eating fast, you're not eating consciously, you're stressed out, right? And again, here's another thing as well, right? Your insular cortex in your brain is responsible for the threshold you can take of trauma and of stress. If your insular cortex is sensitive, which can be passed on from generation to generation, so the trauma you passed on, the threshold of trauma you passed on, you're then less tolerant to stress, which means you have a stressful response. What happens when we're stressed? It pulls the energy away or the blood flow away from digesting food and into our heart and our muscles to survive. And if you're used to living in a stressed state because your threshold is so low for trauma or for stress, you're then thinking that what you're experiencing is normal. Then when you feel calm, you're like, oh, this is calm. And you're experiencing all these autoimmune issues because you're not digesting foods properly. You're then eating fast because you're stressed. You're then eating too many foods. You're then eating the bad foods. You're then also not living in a natural environment. You're then also not spending time in nature with the old friends bacteria. Compounding all these things up here, old friends bacteria is the bacteria we get from nature that reduces inflammation in the body and decreases depression, right? You have all these things going on, and you go to a doctor and they tell you that you have autoimmune disease and here's a pill for it.
Take this printout.
Right? Oh, like you have autoimmune disease. Basically, what that's saying is that we don't know what the fuck to do with you, right? So obviously,
Or
there's specific,
take an immune suppressant.
right? And then, like, so your genetic weakness will be then where the issue lies. So if you have a thing with your bones, you'll experience like autoimmune disease with your arthritis, something like that. If it's with depression, you have severe depression. For myself, and here's the catch, right? I'm not speaking about this from like, oh, I've read a book called Supergut and I've read all these articles, all these science articles and all these things. This is what I've experienced personally. This is me in my personal experience, right? I've lived in a stressful state most of my life and I think it's normal. Then when I'm relaxed, I'm like, whoa, everything's functioning perfectly right now. Like I've had a stressful morning this morning. So I'm in my normal state right now. But after this, I'll go back and I'll sit down and breathe.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of calm now, but I'll go and breathe, and then I'm like, oh, this is me. And I even go further with that. Then I keep building up what's called my vagal tone, which is a tone for your body to be able to deal with stress. Your vagal tone, and take supplements, adrenotone for it, for example, which is all natural ingredients. I then take that And I realized over time that I wasn't even who I was.
Mhm.
I'm this whole different person. And I went through this process of like this stress in my gut all the time. So I just want to share that because anyone listening who's going through autoimmune issues or health issues or gluten intolerances, all these things, there is a or underlying kind of like, oh, sure, you're allergic to gluten, fair enough. But also acknowledging like, are you really who you are right now? Like, are you really living in the experience you are right now? Because that stress you could be feeling or that reality that you're living in, it's called your state set point, right? You live at this state set point right here, which is 7 out of 10 stress. And you don't know that you're stressed because you're so used to living there. And then
Yeah.
when you go in Vipassana for a week, you're like, whoa, oh, wow, Vipassana made me more relaxed. Like, no, you just come back to who you are.
You wouldn't get it. But dude, thank you for all that, Luke. Yes, I there's some solid gems in there, bro. And I think shortcuts a lot of people's pain that they experience going through like your traditional GP,
Yeah,
right?
someone said leaky gut. That's exactly what I had. Sorry to interrupt you there, John.
Yeah, that's great.
So
That's
leaky
spot on.
gut.
Yeah, and
Yeah, exactly right.
that's exactly what my ex had too, right?
They don't address it. It's like here, like just keep going around the medical merry-go-round. And like to add to that as well, I just want to add quickly, like get tested with if you have a gut issue, which most of us do, by the way, do something called GI mapping. Go see a naturopath. If you need someone to see, reach out to me, and I can tell you the right person. Leaky gut, right? I had leaky gut, and I still do a bit now. It comes up every now and then when I'm stressed, ironically. Obviously. And I had this bacterial overgrowth called Dulciferous piga, which is a bacterial overgrowth that when I have fatty foods, or when I had fatty foods, especially animal fats, I was like even worse, right? So this test showed me what was wrong going in my stomach. So the answers are there. It's just like you need to be critical about where you're going to find the answers from. And by critical, I don't mean like, brain, write down. I mean like listen to your intuition, listen to your gut, literally, and also understand like, okay, what is the right thing to do right now? Do I need to do some body work? Is it body psychotherapy? Do I need to see like a nutritionist? Like, what is it that I
Yeah,
need right now? Because there is that next level that you can go towards, but there's this reality you're living right now, this like fishbowl reality of like I'm living in this one-dimensional fishbowl of like who I am isn't you. And it's
yeah.
like I had to learn that the hard way. This like like what was that word you said before? Initiated by fire or like
Baptism by fire.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways,
No,
that's
it's it.
that.
Not anyways. It's perfect, Luke, because I do see there's a pattern where people need to hit a pain point and realize
Yeah,
they don't want to do this anymore.
yeah,
And it can be like someone who's addicted to something. It can be someone who's had a lot of shitty relationships. It can be someone who's about to be destitute. Like you hit a pain point, and you either collapse into it, and you
yeah.
go, "Oh, woe is me," or you go, "You know what? I don't want to do this anymore. What's the other
Mm,
way?" And then you
mm,
start looking for other people. And when you have that intention, like the right people come, like that naturopath that you found that's been a lot of a game changer for you, bro. Like, how did you come
big
across
time.
them?
Well, so I think you might have heard this story before, but so I was seeing her initially because I had sleep maintenance insomnia, another sign of stress, which is irregular cortisol throughout the day. I had sleep maintenance insomnia, which is when I wake up throughout the night. And I was seeing her in 2019. I was taking the right actions to like getting everything fixed. And I imagine if I stayed with her, that would have happened. But then I stopped. I'm like, oh, I can find the answers myself. I have the answers. All good, you know. And then, like I've said to you before, I had to reassess. Like in October last year, it's like this is getting really bad. I'm starting to have like psychotic episodes. I'm starting to trip out. I'm like, what the f is going on? And I was in a moldy place at the time. I don't know if that was a contributor. I'm pretty sure it was. Anyways, so like I had to look myself in the mirror. I think I did at this point. I was just sitting in the mirror. I'm like, huh, why? What have I done to get myself in this position right now? Like, great, like, sure, I'm a victim. Like, there is things that happen to me. I get it. We're all victims to a degree. Like, someone can hit your car, right? And like, fuck, we're victims. But at the same time, we can be victims, but proactively ask, what got me in this position right now? So I asked myself that, and this is coming full circle about how I found her. I asked myself that, and I got in that position because I was arrogant. Arrogant meaning specifically, I distrust people, like you said before.
Mm.
I'm just realizing now, like I distrust people, and I didn't let someone rule that process for me. As soon as I realized that, I got my phone, went on Instagram and saying, "Hey, Brooke," I sent a voice message saying, "Hey, I'm going through some really bad health stuff right now. I realized that I didn't think I needed anyone's help, and I wanted to start seeing you. I mean this for the long haul, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it is. I'll stick with you throughout the whole process." And that realization of asking myself, because for me, naturally, I'm pretty like a accountable person. Like I don't really take like blame other people for much stuff. But there's always that 1% of like, oh, like, why are you suffering so much for? Everyone's able to go out and do what they want to do, but you're stuck inside because you don't have the energy to go outside. It's like, what have I done to cause this? I'm
Mm.
gluttonous sometimes. I like eat lots of food, like random food, like lots of copious amounts of it. And I was being arrogant. I didn't trust someone. So I had to trust her. So I let that self, like, I'm gonna figure out the answers and let someone take over. It's been since December now, and it's been like this, up and down, up and down, up and down, but it's been going up. I went from feeling like 0.5 and like having like weird kind of depressive thoughts and like almost like suicidal ideation, like, and like not even like in the feeling way, but like, oh, this is probably more convenient if it just ends now. And I'm like,
Mm.
holy shit, that's not a thought that I usually
Wow.
have. Like I
Passive
have had that in
ideation.
the
Is
past.
it passive ideation? Like
Like
so,
passive suicidal ideation,
yeah.
like very technical, like, oh, like you probably should just end this right now because you might not find a solution to this. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
not like, not like this is so hard. I gotta get. Like, it's like, no, like, is this a solution? Like, there's not really much of a solution for this. Do I want to live the rest of my life like this? Not really. No. Okay, let's do this. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's dark. That's dark. I'm
Mm.
like, okay. And that forced me to like, where am I not taking responsibility? Which then led me to seeing this person who I've now been with for since December. So what is it, April now, or like, yeah, mid-April. So yeah, I went from 0.5, like literally 0.5 out of 10 in health. Like that's how I felt every single day, to where I'll be having a conversation, I'll be spinning out in my head, to now like I'm probably at a 7 or an 8, right? If I were to measure it, like most days I wake up and I feel normal. So
Wow.
hallelujah.
Bro, how can people reach out to you? Have you got a link that I can throw in the chat?
Nice. Just
What do
my
you
name,
prefer?
like my,
Yeah,
go to an
Facebook or
Instagram.
Instagram? Instagram? Yeah,
Go
cool.
to an Instagram if you want help with your content. That's my main thing. That's what I do for my business. I'd love to help you there. If you want to chat and just have a yarn, then I'm also here as well. Um, yeah, so Luke Raynham, LukeRaynham. That is I, Rabbi.
Yeah, cool.
I love these lives, man. They're so much better than like a thing. Luke, brother, how can I connect? I can't see the names. I'm so sorry. Go to my Instagram, type in Luke, LukeRaynham. Message me on there, and I'll check my requests in there to make sure I get it. So Instagram's the best place, or on Facebook, but probably Instagram because that's where I'm most active. You can see my content there as well. So cool.
Awesome. Bro, your content's incredible. Like you got so many fields of expertise that you like digging into and sharing the wisdom. So if anyone
Mm.
watching, like check him out. Luke's content's amazing. Um,
And also do some work with John. Like I'm not even saying this as like a like help a friend out kind of thing. This is like I really, my life has really genuinely changed since working with John. Since we've been doing this now for over a year, I think I've been even longer. Um, and it's like very subtle, like in a sense of like it's changed, but I just feel more myself. And yeah, I'm more in connect with who I am. So please work with John and connect with John. My last name's there in the chat, Raynham. Thank you, Facebook users. I love you all very much.
so many. I think next time I do this, bro, I'll throw in the little link. There's a little link that integrates Facebook chat so you can see the names.
Yeah,
Um,
cool, man. Awesome.
dude, thank you so much. Um, let's wrap it up. Anything else you want to share?
How are you for time? You have to
Yeah,
go, don't you?
I got to go.
Thanks for being nice, but no, I'm all good. Mr. Nice Guy.
It's a nice guy. I'm good, bro. Peace. Bye.
Peace.